And welcome, once again, to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I am Bob McDonald, and you can find me on Twitter at Bob McDonald. Jimmy Lemke, who is my normal co-host, will not be joining us today, though you can still find him at PantherU on Twitter. And you can find us, the podcast, on Twitter as well, at Horizon RT. And joining us today, making return visits from the Reserve News is Matthew Johns. Matthew, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yes, and Matthew, obviously, we could find the Reserve News on, I believe, at the Reserve Media on Twitter.
Yes, sir.
All right. So lots to talk about this week. We want to talk. A lot of stuff happened this week. For example, Green Bay had a very impressive win over previously undefeated Belmont. So, as a team that was picked to be in the preseason at the top half of the Horizon League standings in the preseason, that's a good thing for them. Also, too, the IUPUI. They also had a pretty good showing against Bradley, beating them, although they did lose to Ball State, which also brings up the fact that it was not a very good weekend for the Horizon League as a whole again, as they only won 2 out of the 11 games that they played on Friday and Saturday. But there's something else. Something else happened this week that kinda is important, and that is that Mike Thomas, the athletic director at Cleveland State, who's been in that job since February of 2017, has decided to step down. And at the end of the year, he will no longer be the athletic director, which took pretty much everybody and their grandmother by surprise. So, Matthew, why don't you, what's your take on this whole thing? Because I have a few opinions of my own, but I want to hear what you got to say.
Well, taking me by surprise is an understatement, because I was just sitting here, I can't remember what night it was, sitting here on the couch watching TV when I got the email from President Harlan Sands saying that he had resigned, and there were no rumblings about this, and at face value, you look at it, and there was really nothing that said, the athletic director's on the hot seat, or he might be on his way out, or anything like that. It just kind of came at random, and I think what's so shocking about it is that it's so short into his tenure, not even 2 years into his tenure, and for a guy who has had the past that he has, when he left when he got fired from his Illinois job, it wasn't obvious that he would ever get another AD job. So the fact that he was able to get that and secure one ought to have been a pretty big accomplishment for him. And now to step down from that at this point, it was just caught me off guard. And it just kind of is, it sums up what has been just nothing but turmoil for the Cleveland State Athletic Department for quite a while now. And it's going to be interesting to see how they recover from this one, because they've already got a lot of positions open. They just hired two new basketball coaches, and it adds to the fire that already is in that department.
Yeah. Well, here's my thing, and obviously, the statements that have been put out and been well documented is that that Mike Thomas decided to do this for personal reasons. Apparently, he wants to spend more time with his kids in North Carolina. He wants to do some teaching. He wants to do some consulting, which is all fine, well and good. Sounds like somebody who's resigning from a cabinet position to me, but whatever. Here's the thing, though. You're looking at a Cleveland State department, and having followed the goings-on in athletics for many, many years. This is a very crucial time for that department. Because right now, you look at a situation where that entire athletic program is toiling in obscurity, either by choice or by the fact that nobody gives a shit about them. Period. I mean, think about this for a second. And I just go beyond the fact that, go beyond the basketball programs, both of them. Even though you could, you have an athletic program that has had both a volleyball team and a golf team that have won consecutive conference championships.
Right.
Name me somebody outside of the halls of Cleveland State that knows about that or gives a shit about that.
Well, I would say 90%.
Other than me.
90% of the people within the halls of Cleveland State don't know about that.
Exactly.
I mean, the problems with the Cleveland State Athletic Department go so far beyond just communication with people outside of the university.
Yeah.
Nobody at the university cares about the athletics.
And they're paying money and they're paying millions of dollars every year for it.
Right.
Every fucking year.
Yep. Yeah, 90%
90%
of the funding for the athletics there comes from students.
Yes.
And one, most students don't even know that. And two, I mean, even if they did, would they care? Would they care about the teams at that point?
Good question. And you know, and how do you fix that? And if you're looking at this job, how do you fix that problem? How do you address that issue? Because John Perry was never going to fix that issue. Basically, he was there for 8 years, and he just made sure that all the books were balanced. And that was basically, and oh, by the way, find enough money for him to create, to form the lacrosse program, which he was able to do to his everlasting credit. The athletic program was in the black, and he was able to add a program, although the whole wrestling flap was kind of stupid, and I'm never going to let him forget about that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, what did he do? I mean, other than that, he basically, other than keeping the books balanced, there wasn't anything else. It wasn't, there was no addressing. Even during his tenure, there was because again, no matter what any of these other athletics programs do, the bottom line is the crown jewel of the athletics program for Cleveland State, and honestly for all mid-majors without a football program, is the basketball program. And for consecutive years, when you have an issue of, and Mike Thomas even made a point of this, the fact that the crown jewel of this program is in terms of attendance is going down every single year.
And it has not been pretty so far this year.
No, it hasn't.
Outside of the Kent State game.
And that was only 2,000 people who showed up to that game.
Right.
I can tell you right now, when Mike Garland was the head coach, Mike Garland, who by all regards was a not good head basketball coach. Great assistant has been up at Michigan State forever and ever and ever. Not a great head coach. When he was the head coach, they were still in the middle of the pack in attendance in the Horizon League. Still. And still when now, I mean, even now it's like, how many people showed up to the Fort Wayne game? 777?
Right. Yep.
That's it?
Yep.
Seriously? I mean, I get it's on a Sunday on Browns weekend and the Browns won, but the game was at 5 o'clock. The Browns game was over at 4, and it was an away game.
Yep.
I mean,
I think outside of the Kent State game, the only other game that's tipped 1,000 people was South Carolina State. I don't think Samford got over 1,000. I don't think Urbana did either.
Oh, Urbana sure as hell didn't.
Yeah, I think they've both been in like the 700 to 800 range, somewhere in there.
But but that's the challenge here. And again, that's a challenge that Mike Thomas himself, when he first took the job, said was something that needs to be addressed. He needs to address donations, and he needs to address the attendance issue. And what does it say when you have a Cleveland State, you have a guy who says that attendance is a priority, leaving as of December 31st, and you'll have had, I want to say probably you'll have played 2 conference games. Half of your season is pretty much, you'll have played about 15, 16 games in the regular season already. And as he steps down, you're going to see Cleveland State having the lowest average attendance in the history of Cleveland's. I think probably the lowest average attendance since they've been, definitely the lowest average attendance since they've been at the Wolstein Center. And I would wager to say that there are certain points during the Kevin Mackey era of Woodland Gym that they're not even hitting those average numbers. These would be low numbers for Woodland Gym,
right?
Let alone the cavernous and way too big Wolstein Center, which, oh, by the way, they can't even do anything with either, because that was another thing, the Wolstein Center. They're not going to do anything with that building.
They can't.
No,
they can't even afford to knock it down, let alone build a new one.
And they keep booking things for it. I think they're doing the fencing championships there in 2019. I think they're hosting the division. I think the Wolstein Center is hosting the Division II Wrestling Championships, I think, in 2020. And, oh, by the way, let's not forget about All-Star Weekend, which Harlan Sands made a big-ass deal about, partnering with the Cavaliers, saying, okay, there's going to be some activities at the Wolstein Center in 2022. He said the Wolstein Center, which means that it's 2018 right now. It's a minimum of 3.5 years before anybody can even think of doing anything with the Wolstein Center, which for at least 5 years, probably longer.
Well,
nobody's had any idea what to do with.
They're going to have to dump so much money into that place just to get it ready for NBA All-Star Weekend, because they're not going to want it to be, because obviously it's going to be packed.
Yeah.
They're not going to want all these people coming in and seeing, quite frankly, what a dump the place is. So they can't afford to knock it down, let alone build a new one. But now they're going to have to dump any money that they do have into renovating the place. So maybe that's the long-term play now. We're going to stick with the Wolstein Center and just renovate it. It still doesn't fix the issue, but it's way too big.
I can't think that. I honestly can't think that there wasn't. I can't honestly think that there was that Cleveland State would agree to partnering with the Cavs on this All-Star Weekend without some sort of concessions, without some sort of deal being made regarding the Wolstein Center. Anything. Putting up new drapes. I don't care. Anything to improve for All-Star Weekend. Because I guarantee you, with what they're doing at the Q, that whole gigantic transformation, you can't necessarily you can't have, the Wolstein Center looking all spiffy and stuff for All-Star Weekend, and then, during the Friday and Saturday activities you can't go over to the Q looking all spiffy and then go over to the Wolstein Center.
Well, they don't even have... they have a video board in the Wolstein Center, but it doesn't work.
No.
And it's tiny in a corner.
Yeah.
There's obviously no Jumbotron.
No. There's
how is that going to work? The fan experience is going to be awful.
That's funny. Maybe the new scoreboard is part of the deal. Maybe. I don't know. Because everybody who's going to the Wolstein Center, I'm sure, because I think they're doing the celebrity game here, saying, we got to see, I'm sure maybe they'll throw in, maybe the NBA is going to decide to throw in a Jumbotron so everybody can see Kevin Hart on the big screen, which, as short as he is, you're probably going to have to need a Jumbotron to see him on the court. So, but again, that's just an example of the challenge that this new athletic director, and I'm not even going to get into who's going to be the interim. I don't know who it is. We have our ideas who it's going to be, but bottom line is, it's probably I see this job being a job that's again looking at I'm sure Cleveland State has an idea of what they want for an athletic director. Personally, I think they need to go back to what worked to begin with, what worked to begin with was back in 2002 when John Constantinos retired as director. Michael Schwartz, who was the president of Cleveland State at the time, and and Cleveland State in general, decided they were going to go with a young guy, a younger athletic administrator who would kind of build his bones at Cleveland State, and not knowing it at the time, but understanding that probably one day he was going to end up going somewhere else, seeking life elsewhere. And they found that in Lee Reed. Lee Reed, who, again, had some ties to Cleveland State. He actually played at Cleveland State in the 80s. And he was there for however many years. I think he was there from 2002 to around 2010. Hired Gary Waters. Hired Kate Peterson-Abiad. Again, the men's and women's basketball coaches, who, by the way, both of them the all-time winningest basketball coaches in the histories of both men's and women's basketball. He hired Chuck Voss, the volleyball coach, who won. However, I can't even count how many consecutive volleyball championships he's won. That's how successful they've been. And they also won and he built all that, and then, based on that foundation of success, with, everything at Cleveland State, he takes the job at Georgetown. And I really sincerely think that if Cleveland State wants to finally get around to, addressing, at least remotely addressing some of the issues that they have, they need to go in that same direction. Not pull somebody out of retirement like they did with John Perry. Not somebody who's looking at trying to be a reclamation project like Mike Thomas. Go young. Understand that, yes, in 5 to 10 years, this guy may end up going somewhere else. But knowing that when that guy goes somewhere 5 to 10 years from now, he will have left your department better off than it was before. And I think that's the direction they need to go.
Well, and honestly, I don't know if they really have another option, because if you're, and I don't know how they're going to do the hiring process, whether it'll be a committee, whether it'll be Harlan Sands, whatever, but if you're in that person's shoes, how do you sell a candidate? Like, how do you sell this department to them? They're in shambles in their two most notable programs, being the two basketball teams. The last athletic director just walked out less than 2 years into his tenure, and whatever that reason may be, whatever that personal reason may be, it doesn't look good on the department. And the fact that they're being tight-lipped about it doesn't help. How do you do it? How do you hire a candidate in this situation other than just trying to get somebody who's younger, who doesn't have a lot of experience, who you can just say, hey, we're going to give you the opportunity. And that's going to be about it, other than throwing a ton of money at somebody, which I don't think they're going to do that either. No. They really don't have another option unless they can pull out some miracle, or if they're, I don't think they would appoint somebody in-house, but
you never know.
You never know, but
you never know. But and I'm glad you brought that. Obviously, I'm glad you brought that up because, and again, I harken back to the Constantinos retirement back in 2002, where when they brought in Lee Reed, essentially the same situation, where you have your men's and women's basketball teams weren't doing so great. Not only that, but you were on the hook for a lot. You were on, and not only that, but the rest of your programs were not, compared to where Cleveland State was as a program, as a department as a whole. In 2018, I would say they are in 2018 comparably better off than they were in 2002. Wherein they do have successful programs. But the challenge still remains the same, where you still have, kind of at the top where there's still some challenges. And then there's some internal things, which incidentally Lee Reed also addressed as well internally. And so I think if they look at it from that standpoint, if you're Cleveland State, you look at it at that point in time, and honestly, I'm not sure if they will. Cleveland State's sense of history is crap. I've known that for years. But if they looked at it in that way, and if they sell it as, okay, this is the challenge that we need, be it by a committee or by search firm. I can't remember how they did it with the athletic director last time, but if you look at in that regard, then I see an opportunity for, and you'd be surprised how many young folks or younger administrators look at this and say, okay, that's a challenge. I'd like to do that. I see that, and I mean, I saw it with Lee Reed. I don't doubt that there's another person out there like that. I don't doubt it, but more to the point, and this is actually kind of scary because you now have from a conference standpoint, you now have a kind of a new wrinkle where you thought, from a conference standpoint, you thought maybe Cleveland State was kind of slowly but surely turning it around, and now their athletic director is resigning, and that throws one of your 10 programs into turmoil. One of your 10 programs at a time where you don't want that to be happening. You already just went through a horrendous season in 2017, 2018. You were hoping not for a repeat of that, and now you have this happening. I don't know, man. It's not a great situation.
I mean, you say you don't want a repeat of that. They're obviously not off to a great start.
They are not, and that and it didn't help that again. And it really didn't help this weekend where you had 11 games on Friday and Saturday, and the Horizon League won 2 of them.
Yeah.
Although the one I will say, which actually brings me to one of the ones that they actually did win, which was actually the game, which was Green Bay, putting it on previously undefeated Belmont. Now Belmont is an interesting situation. Belmont has been in the Ohio Valley Conference for years and years and years. Them and Murray State. Belmont is always kicked around as a potential program that could seek life elsewhere in terms of moving conferences. When the Horizon League was still in a position to talk about inviting people into the conference, which, let's face it, they're absolutely not now. But when they were, Belmont was always kicked around as a potential invitee. I mean, and Belmont was even an associate member in soccer, with the provision that they were even able to play games here. So it was a nice partnership with Belmont, even though they were never a full member when it lasted. And they were actually. And they're, as a program itself, Belmont has been very solid, very good. And coming into this season, the same thing has happened, where they go into Green Bay, they go into Green Bay undefeated, and then Green Bay turns around and they beat them 192. So that actually leads me to believe that, and Green Bay has been consistently picked at by a lot of the preseason prognosticators to be kind of at the top of the conference, and I don't see any reason to dispel that prediction, because I think as a team right now, I really do think that they have the tools right now to be able to. They have the tools to be able to compete with this league. I know Green Bay fans have been telling us, we're telling us all over the preseason, don't sleep on Green Bay. Don't sleep on Green Bay. I think this is one of those wins where, it's kind of a highlight of that point that Green Bay may have what it takes to really get it together and really definitely compete for the top spot in the Horizon League.
Yeah, and I mean their offense is going to lead the way all season. I mean they're leading the Horizon League in offense right now, in terms of points per game. They're averaging over 86 points a game. Mm-hmm. I mean that's. Northern Kentucky is right there with them at 82, but that's what's going to have to carry Green Bay. Their defense is middle of the road, but if they can score at that clip, I mean that's far and above what any Horizon League team is going to average per game. And obviously that number's not going to stick all season, But I mean, you and I being Cleveland State guys, if you watch a Cleveland State game and they even score in the 80s, it's a big day. And Cleveland State's offense isn't bad, and it's not bad this year. They've got plenty of
it really isn't.
But when you are averaging in the mid 80s when you're through 8 games in a season, that's pretty good, and that's something that's going to probably, in terms of the offense in general, that high-powered offense is going to be around to stay throughout the season. That's going to be tough for other schools to compete with down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a testament too, because kind of a testament to head coach Link Darter. This is his system. This is RP40 in action. That's his system. So it's interesting that when you see it in action, you see just kind of the offensive production that they're getting, and they'll get it from anywhere. I mean, if you look at the box score for Belmont, they had 6 guys in double figures.
Right.
So you at any point in time you could have. It's amazing because with Green Bay, with this system, with the guys that they have, any single one of them can go off. You can have one night, you can have a Sandy Cohen go off, or you can go have a Jaquan McLeod go off, or you can have a Cameron Hankerson. You can have, you've got so many choices, you've got so many players to choose from, and it's kind of that system that Darner has put together come to fruition. I mean, last year, and I said at the beginning of the year, right before the year started, I really thought that Green Bay was not, last year was a down year for Green Bay. It did not seem to me that they would be the program. I thought for sure that they would bounce back, and they're 5-3 in the they're 5-3 in the non-conference. And I mean, if you're looking at this from a standpoint of, and when you look at it from a standpoint of non-conference games, you will find yourself obviously, with a mix of games that are. You're going to be going up against higher majors. I mean, one of those losses was a 9-point loss to Oregon. I mean, to hang with Oregon to hang with Oregon, in their arena in Eugene,
right,
is kind of a testament. And then turning around and then being a very good Belmont team that was previously undefeated. I mean, I think that's a testament to what they're trying, what Link Darner is trying to do over at Green Bay, and again, a testament to that system, that RP40 system of his.
Yeah,
I don't want to play him this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Oregon. They did the same thing against Iowa, and I was ranked higher than Oregon, and they lost by the same margin, by 11.
Yeah.
And they put up 82 points on Iowa.
Yeah.
So if you're the Horizon League, they're being bought by bigger programs to come in and get beat.
Sure.
And if you can go in, and even if they don't beat Oregon or Iowa, if they just go in there and hang with them, that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it, when Cleveland State played Ohio State, they hung with them throughout the first half.
Yeah.
And it felt great. You knew they weren't going to win. And obviously they didn't.
No.
But just hanging with them, that says something about these smaller mid-major schools, if they can just at least be in the game at some point.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Which, and that's kind of the big, and that's really a big deal. I mean, because you look at the non-conference, you see, there's not going to be a lot of opportunities for wins, specifically against the so-called Power 5 conferences. But these higher mid-major schools, and I know Jimmy and I have talked about this on multiple occasions, where you have where a Belmont comes in, and you're able to beat them. That's especially that's a pretty big deal. One of the other games I wanted to point out was the fact that IUPUI, who I will still to my dying day consider them, in addition to the Horizon League, by panic, because Valpo left at the last minute. They consistently continue to prove me wrong. I guess I'm kind of okay with that. But and in spite of the fact they did lose to Ball State on Saturday, again, not a great weekend at all for the Horizon League. Earlier in the week, they did get a win against Bradley, who had only lost one game, and they did that on the road. And they won that one pretty handily. I'd like to and I think in that case, I guess maybe I didn't do enough. Camron Justice, mm-hmm. who is IUPUI star player. Do we get to a point? I mean, he put up 27 against Bradley.
8 against Ball State then too.
I'm sorry, how many again?
28 against Ball State.
I mean, the question with Camron Justice is, do we start thinking about putting him in the same conversation as a Drew McDonald, as a Loud Love, as a potential Player of the Year candidate at this point?
Yeah,
because the guy's balling.
Right. You can't say no as long as he keeps playing like this. I
mean, you're looking at and that's and I think with that and perhaps. And perhaps given, I know we've talked about IUPUI so many times and up and down and all around about, kind of their place in the Horizon League. And I know when we had, during the fan forum, we had talked about potentially, when we had Chris Schutte on, he had mentioned IUPUI may not necessarily be in a position to be a potential spoiler they may not be there yet as a potential spoiler in the Horizon League. If you got Camron Justice, I'm not so sure.
Right. I mean, if you have an impact player like that can take over a game like he can.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always going to be a possibility. And, I mean, Northern Kentucky obviously is the class of the league.
Of course.
But you just can't – you can never take a team out of the conversation when they have a player the caliber of him. So you say that can you put them in that conversation to be spoiler this year? I don't see why not. I mean, they're 5-3 right now. Mm-hmm. They might not have to play spoiler because they might be having to defend off a spoiler. I don't think they're going to flirt with first place or anything like that, but they could be in the upper half of the league this year if they keep playing well.
Well, I mean, let's remember last year when we were complaining about them being in the league, they finished fifth. So
right. I mean, everybody assumed last year that they were going to be like them, Cleveland State, Detroit Mercy, and Youngstown State, who's going to finish last. And IUPUI they were much better than anybody expected them to be.
Yeah, I mean, maybe last year not so much the fact that IUPUI was so much better than everybody, that everybody was so much worse.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and again, that's that, and maybe that's because of the fact there's going to be so many, and I think that's going to be the case this year. Except this season, you see IUPUI doing some things in the non-conference. We didn't see him do it all last year in the non-conference. So that's definitely going to be something to watch in terms of IUPUI. I'm looking forward to seeing them. I had hoped they would do better against Ball State, but unfortunately that was not to be. But yeah, it's very interesting to see a team see IUPUI get it together, and really maybe sitting there kicking themselves because they left the Summit League. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, all right. So one of the last things I wanted to talk about is Detroit Mercy. Detroit Mercy, who I don't know, man. I did not expect them. I did not expect them to have as good a non-conference season as they have been.
Right.
And I mean, mind you, they're 3-5, but I really didn't expect them to get those 3 wins, given the way they were coming into the season.
Yeah, I mean, for a team that was just so down and out by the end of the season last year, just everything going on with the coaching situation, the late hire, they seemed like they were almost going to just automatically be a write-off this season.
Yeah,
they were going to be at the bottom, and like you said, they're 3-5, so they're not exactly, they're not IUPUI, but
No.
but
No. You don't expect them to. Bottom line is, you still don't expect them to be to be competing for anything. But at the same time, you see them and say, wow, they're not doing as bad as we thought. Not even close.
The thing that does concern me with Detroit Mercy is that you look at their stats; they've only got 2 guys averaging double-digit points per game. And,
Antoine Davis and Josh McFawley, but
right.
That's kind of, to me, that was kind of to be expected, because when Mike Davis came in, you had so many of the, folks, so many of the Bakari Alexander recruits transfer. So I wasn't, the fact that they brought in Mike Davis and by extension, of course, his son Antoine, who, he's a high caliber player. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was committed to go to Houston. That's an AAC conference team. I mean, where they are in the standings is, remains to be seen, but that's nothing to sneeze at. And so, for him to be able to put up, I mean, right now Antoine Davis is kind of he's the runaway freshman of the year candidate in the Horizon League. I don't think anybody's going to come anywhere near him. The way he's playing, if he continues to do what he's doing, he's going to be the runaway conference conference freshman of the year, right. Without a doubt.
If he averages 30 points a game, he's going to be in the conversation for player of the year too. That's
going to be an interesting thing, though, because that's kind of the question that we have to ask ourselves. Do we? Because is he going to? Because he's unlike the non-conference, he's going to get every team's going to get 2 shots at him during the conference schedule. Do you think? I don't really necessarily see him averaging 30 points a game in the conference schedule. He's doing it now, sure, but I don't think he's going to. It would be very hard for him to. I would find it very hard for him to do that during the conference schedule. I just knowing that you're going to play him twice, I would find it very hard to see him kind of compete. To be able to put up those kind of numbers. He might, but I just don't see it.
I doubt it, and like I mentioned before, I think that's really what is going to be Detroit Mercy's Achilles heel this season. Yep. Is once, if you shut him down, it's not easy, but if you shut him down, what do? Where do they go? Josh McFawley's having a fine season. He's averaging 15 a game.
Sure.
But having a guy average 15 a game and then your only other scoring threat is shut down, you're done. You're not going to win games. So, I mean, if teams are going to game plan to shut him down, that's what they're going to try to do going into the game, because they know if they can do that, they've got a pretty good shot to win the game.
Sure. So, and I think the other challenge that you have on the Detroit Mercy side is that, I mean, just the passage of time, because Antoine Davis is playing big numbers for Detroit Mercy right now. Is he gonna? I guess the other question is going to be: is he going to run out of gas?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point too.
I mean, if you're playing like 35, 40 minutes a game, 35, 40 minutes every game, after a certain point in time, you're going to hit a wall.
Yeah, he's averaging 38 minutes a game right now.
Yeah,
and it's not like he's averaging 38 minutes a game and he's out there but not doing much. He's doing almost everything while he's out there. He's going to be gassed. So, yeah, it's a good point, too. So, I wonder when they start getting closer to Horizon League play, or even sooner, if they start cutting those minutes back a bit. There's
I'd be
interested
to see that. I'd be interested to see if they do that. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, given Detroit Mercy's situation where, they're kind of feeling their way through they're kind of feeling their way through this right now. I don't know if they do that. I mean, but then again, I mean, I learned long ago not to underestimate Mike Davis. So you never know. And again, and I'd like to point out again, they're 3-5 right now. They hung with Kent State. They actually hung with Kent State, and they eventually lost by 4. But they were at one point in time they were up by 9 on Kent State, and they only lost by 4. So, I mean, it's, and again, it's you'll see some learning experiences coming out, especially with some of these younger teams, with the Detroit Mercies, with, to a much greater extent, Cleveland State. But yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing kind of how that shakes out with Kent State. And again, when they played Akron, they lost by, they did lose by 12 to Akron on Saturday, but they were in the game with Akron for most of that game. And they lost by 12 to Akron when, say, by comparison, Youngstown State at the beginning of the season lost to Akron by way more than that. So, I mean, I would look at it from a comparison standpoint that maybe potentially Detroit is progressing much faster than we thought they would, and kind of leading me to believe that, again, maybe you underestimate Mike Davis at your peril. Always a distinct possibility. But again, yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing kind of how they shake out in the conference schedule, which is interesting because the first two teams they play in, Detroit Mercy plays in the conference schedule, is Cleveland State and Youngstown State.
Right, so they could come out looking real good after those first two games, and it could all be false. And when they start playing teams that are going to be in the upper part of the Horizon League this year, so it's going to be tough to judge them based on those first two games because, let's face it, Cleveland State and Youngstown State are bad teams. So the only other thing that I look at is, you say Detroit Mercy might be an up-and-coming team, and I agree with you there, but is Mike Davis enough to keep Antoine Davis at Detroit Mercy?
I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question. And to that I answer because I don't know. I'd say yes. And I say yes because of the fact that, again, I don't know how Detroit Mercy keeps doing this, but this isn't the first father-son combination with Detroit Mercy. As you recall, Ray McCallum had his son Ray Jr., and he played for him the whole time. And they did very well. They won a conference championship. They won the conference tournament, went to an NCAA tournament. And I guess the question that I would ask is, what happens what will happen post Antoine Davis? Just as like the same question as we had, what will happen to Detroit post Ray McCallum Jr.? Right. You already know the answer to that. But at the same time, when you compare the caliber of coaches, Mike Davis is an infinite. I mean, I think we can all objectively agree Mike Davis is has a infinitely stronger resume than Ray McCallum did. Right. Infinitely stronger. I mean, he was able to. Yes, he did it with Bobby Knight's guys, but he took he took a Indiana team to the Final Four. He was consistently able to get Texas Southern annually to the NCAA tournament. And so I think and same thing with UAB when he was there. So from that standpoint, I think Mike Davis has got a stronger resume, and I think he's got a stronger pedigree. And I also think that he has. Honestly, his son could have just as easily stayed at Houston. Mm-hmm. So I think it's also a level of buy-in too, right. and he could the level of buy-in he can get from not only his son. You got to remember also too, Josh McFawley could have went somewhere else, just like everybody else did on that team. Right. But Josh McFawley stayed; he bought in. So I think from that standpoint, I think Mike Davis has the ability to establish enough buy-in, not only with the players that he has now, but players in the future, that I don't know how this season's going to go, but in subsequent seasons, I think Detroit Mercy has the potential to be back to where it needs to be in the Horizon League, which is something that the Horizon League needs desperately.
Right, and the only last note I have on Antoine Davis as far as him staying at Detroit Mercy the one thing with him staying at Detroit Mercy he'll never have to worry about is he will be the star as long as he is here. Because,
yeah, I mean...
mostly because of his talent, but also because his dad's coaching the team. He will be the star, and he'll have eyes on him as long as he's on this team.
Absolutely. And again, and also, too, and I think this is also very important to note, because if you have the talent, people are going to find you. Just like people found, back in the 2010s, people found Shelvin Mack. People found Gordon Hayward. People found Norris Cole. People found Alec Peters at Valpo. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. The scouts will find you. There's this crazy thing called the internet going on. You can find anything on it.
Yeah, and I mean, his name's right at the top of the scores in NCAA, too. So people are going to be seeing him real quick.
Exactly. So, all right. So with that said, we're going to close out this episode. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us again.
Hey, thanks for the invite. I hope we can do it again.
No doubt. And you can catch all episodes of the Horizon Roundtable on sportsax.com, hax.com. You can also find us on wherever you find podcasts, be it iTunes, Google Play Music, TuneIn, you name it. You can also ask your Amazon Echo or Google Home device to play us, and I know that works. As well as we're also on iHeartRadio now and Spotify. So wherever you get, we're pretty much everywhere now. So feel free to find us, and we'll see you, catch you again next episode. And thank you for listening.